And I think we are live. Hello, everyone. Happy to have you today. I am Flav from the BGA, and very glad to have you today for our panel on play to earn, how to educate, and which mass adoptions. It's a real pleasure to have our speakers today. And actually, it's going to be a very interesting conversation. Uh, it's not longer a dream for any people, for everyone to get paid by playing, enjoying, have a good time and playing a game. And people have today are helping to educate the people, and the company we have today are helping to educate people on what does it mean to play a game and earn money. So blockchain is all about have access to financial services for everyone, gain access for everyone for financial services. And these companies are helping to solve this entry barrier issue through gaming, through player games. So it's going to be very interesting to have their opinion and they share their expertise on that. And, education also concerns not only the fact to earn money, but also to be prepared of what's coming with play to earn games in terms of new job opportunities around play to earn games. So how to be prepared, how to educate, how to be educated on those things. So just to begin with a simple question, actually, I would like to ask our speakers to introduce themselves and introduce who they are and what they are doing. And if you agree, Peter, you will be the first to start.
Yeah, with pleasure. Thanks so much for having us here, Flav, and great to see the guys here, with the boys. I call them of Play to Earn. So my name is Peter Ing. I'm the founder of Blockchain Space. We're a relatively new company working in data analytics and tooling for Play to Earn guilds. So what we do is we aggregate a lot of data on guilds, which basically helps us to provide, I guess, like better insights for guilds that helps them to make kind of like actionable changes within their guilds. So hopefully earn more money and also, better take care of their community. And then essentially what we do with that data is also extend financial services. So that's kind of like the component that will come after kind of like all the data aggregation and all the tooling kind of combines.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peter. Johnny, if you want to continue by introduce what you do in Morpheus League, even if some of the audience might already know that because we actually got you last year for our new members presentations. But yeah, please introduce yourself.
Sure. So, yeah, thanks for the introduction. And yeah, really glad to be here with these guys on the call. So, in short, I'm Johnny. I'm the CEO of Morpheus League. So, we are a metaverse organization, and we're essentially using our platform to bridge the metaverse for anyone globally. And with that, what we try to do is help equip them with tools, resources, and the most important component for us is the education needed to thrive in the metaverse. So we're a guild, but we're leveraging that play to earn industry as our key pillar, where we're able to then onboard people into the community, give them scholarships, and then from there transition them to other roles by educating them and upskilling them.
Great, awesome. Thank you very much, Johnny. Sarutobi, if you can introduce yourself as well and EL Guild Games.
Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, so my name's Sarutobi. I'm head of partnerships at YGG. I've been working in the kind of play to earn space for quite a long time. Yield Guild Games, I believe, is arguably one of the most well-known play to earn guilds. I think we were one of the very first, if not the first, and we've managed to kind of help onboard like already tens of thousands of people into play to earn. And we're trying to be a real champion for the space at large, investing heavily across a wide array of games and projects, and working very closely with many others as well. And we have the aim of wanting to onboard like millions of people to the metaverse and Web3, and we're well on the way of achieving that goal.
Awesome. Yes, actually it's all about education today, and I know that some of you in the audience, first, if you want to ask any question to these speakers, feel free to drop any question you will have in the chat, and I will make sure to address this question at the end or during the presentation, obviously. So yeah, it's all about education, which means that we have to start with something. And I know that in the audience, some of them are capitalizing on our content to understand better what is blockchain gaming. So with a very simple question, maybe necessary question, Sarutobi, if you have to define these words and this world, which are mentors, scholars, guilds, what does it mean exactly?
So yeah, I mean, obviously, in this world, a guild is basically like a community of people that often have like assets that are owned at like the guild level, and the community can access these assets. This is very much in the case of a blockchain gaming guild specifically, but a blockchain gaming guild can also be other things as well. They can be like esports teams within that as well. There can be community activities that they get to do in real life as well. Obviously, it's something that over time one could imagine that it combines much of what we see in like the traditional gaming guild world as well. People might just play games of fun. It's not always just about earning. I think there's this kind of misconception amongst many people that like being part of a play to earn or blockchain gaming guild is just about play to earn. It can be just for the love of gaming as well. And I think that's something that as guilds we need to embrace more and try and encourage and incubate more. You've mentioned there the word scholar, correct? And so scholar being the name for players that leverage guild owned assets to kind of seek out yield in various games. So in just as I mentioned there before, the guild or DAO, or sometimes they're one and the same, might own NFT assets and then lend those NFT assets to the scholar or player in this case, who would then use those in the games and yield in those virtual economies. And that would be something that benefits both themselves and also the guild. You mentioned the word mentor. Obviously, within the community, we see a lot of people who really rise to the opportunity and want to kind of evolve as participants in these social groups. So they often like help coach and develop the skills of their fellow players. It's been a really wonderful thing to see and evolve. I've set up multiple guilds myself, and it's really amazing when we see people kind of step up and sort of take the initiative. And sometimes this has been something that's like, it's not incentivized, it's just something that people really want to do. They want to get in there and help their fellow community members in many different ways. And I've got plenty of really amazing stories of this happening. And I do hope to see it continue to happen as the space grows. So those at least for those terms, I'm sure there's. Are there any other terms there? I think that was mentor, scholar, and guild, right? I think I've done it.
Yeah, actually, very comprehensive definition. Thank you very much for that. Continuing on that, with all the aspects we have about DeFi, other technologies around blockchain, how can you help guilds to be educating and educate their own members for playing play-to-earn games? What is the strategy with you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's an evolving process. One of the things that we're doing, for example, is it's actually something which we made an announcement for today, which has been called the Guild Advancement Program. This is basically the start of the questing system that's going to be like a pillar of the kind of YGG ecosystem, which basically means that if you're a guild badge holder, you're going to be able to kind of access this dashboard and complete certain tasks. Maybe these might be, you might get all kinds of different things for these. Some of them may be incentivized with YGG tokens. Some might kind of allow you to accrue like non-transferable NFTs, like reputational NFTs, which I think is going to be a really huge concept over the coming years, one that could be really meaningful in play-to-earn economies. It could be also used in DeFi for kind of counteracting the effect of whales and amplifying the governance of real participants as opposed to those with just financial clout. So I definitely think that like some degree of incentivization and building a framework by which players can have like set quests of what they're going to go out and do. In addition to that, though, within the communities themselves, something that I'm sure Peter would has seen as well from the many guilds that he's worked with, is like people who enter these entities, they really go out to self-educate as well. I think it's a real hallmark of being a scholar, again, to use that term. They do kind of come in, they self-educate because of the opportunity there. But generally within the guilds as well, we do provide lots of resources, and you've mentioned the mentors there. So obviously the mentors would be very key in helping develop the skills of new participants. But on top of that, I think what's going to be really key is the development of these rails and skill trees, which is almost a meta game in itself. And I think that's another thing that many people don't realize, is that the kind of guild community can actually be like a meta game. It can be a game itself, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, gamification is actually a big part of this learning process for them to master blockchain technologies within game. Yeah, very, very, very interesting. Actually, for you, Peter, empowering guilds to scale. This is something you talk about with the blockchain space. What does it mean exactly? What kind of needs it is?
Yeah, so that's probably a perfect segue actually from Sarutobi's inputs just now. So I think firstly we have to define kind of what is a guild, right? In the current form and in the current ecosystem. So I think that's where our data basically provides some insights here. So what we do is actually we segment the market into 3 different categorizations. So the first being micro guilds, which we consider to be those that are managing kind of 10 accounts up to 100 accounts. And then we look at mid-tier guilds, which are those that are managing around 100 accounts up to 1,000 accounts. And then we look at macro guilds, which are those like YGG, which are managing over 1,000 accounts. Now, why do we segment like this? Mostly because of kind of like the challenges that they face. So exactly what Sarutobi was mentioned earlier about kind of like, being able to educate and basically help your community. You have kind of different challenges at different sizes. So if you can imagine, those that are just managing 10 accounts don't really have the same problems that those that are managing 1,000+ accounts are having, right? And then again, even those that are managing 100 to 1,000 accounts are in a different league to those that are managing 10 to 100 accounts as well. Now, actually, if you have a look at kind of like so the segmentation of the market, the way that we see it right now, according to the data, is that 97% is actually skewed towards the micro guild side, meaning that the large majority of people actually have just only a few accounts, basically between 10 to 100, and those people generally have only invested anywhere between like $3,000 to $10,000 into their setting up their programs, so these guilds. Right. And then if you have a look at the others that are, running about 100 to 1,000, these guys are investing, 10,000 to like 100,000. And then if you're looking at those that are managing 1,000+, we're looking at way, way larger investment sizes. And so like, just by the definition of kind of, who these people are, you can understand that, their challenge is going to be very different. So if you can imagine for like those on the micro side. So again, going back to your question, Flav, about empowering, right? So how can we empower these people, right? And so those in the micro guild side, what we see is like a trend for these people is kind of the education side, the kind of like running a business side. They're not actually, a lot of these people came in basically setting up their own small kind of like businesses, right? But not actually intending to kind of run a business, right? And they basically came into, like most people actually came in through Axie Infinity, and a lot of it was word of mouth. So like a cousin or a brother or a sister basically tells you about Axie and says, like you need to invest about $100, $200 or something, or you can play as a scholar first for one of these existing guilds, earn enough money, right? Then own your own assets, so own your team, and then reinvest anything that you earn after that, and then you can scale up your business and it starts to grow a little bit, right? And so those people didn't really intend to, I think a lot of them didn't intend to run this kind of like sustainable business model in the play to earn ecosystem, but basically found themselves owning several accounts, for Axie Infinity or other games now, right? That are now wondering, like earnings have gone down. Like people don't really want to play Axie anymore because like the SLP value has gone down so much, and the maximum amount of SLP that you can actually farm in a day is actually very low. If you're not a very competitive player, then you can't even rise up too far on the leaderboard, which will give you AXS rewards. So then these people have a challenge where they're like, yeah, this is getting a little bit more complicated than what I signed up for. So then they're thinking like, should I continue this business or not? If I do continue this business, how do I continue? Like, what do I need to like release some of my assets? Do I need to reinvest some of my assets? And who's going to educate me along this process? And so we're seeing the largest part of the market basically is stuck in this area where they're just like, whoa, I'm not quite sure where to go next, right? And there are so many games out there. I'm sure like everyone here is kind of speaking to quite a few games. We make also a point to speak to a lot of games, and there are at least a good like 10, 20 games that we feel like are generally quite strong that other guilds should be getting into, right? And someone has to basically highlight these games to those guilds, explain kind of what are the benefits, how do you actually get in, and kind of like, I guess it goes back down to education again, just kind of like handhold a little bit, teach them kind of like, this is the investment size, this is how fast you think you can get ROI within the game. These are the mechanics of the game, and you should probably enjoy this game because it's very similar to this style game which you're already playing with already. Right. So I think it's really important to kind of like segment the market into kind of like these different types of guilds first, to understand really what is the pain point. Because if you look at, Sarutobi's challenge, it's completely different to a micro guild. His is not so much about like the day-to-day kind of like P&L, but is more of his challenge is more about how do I onboard like the next 100,000 up to 1 million, kind of like the next millions of players, right? And how do we educate and do this in mass? Whereas like the micro guild is really focused on kind of like the daily earnings and how do I get day to day, how do I get by day to day, and how do I how do I learn about what are other business models out there that actually can complement what I'm doing already. So I think that's generally the way I would look at it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And actually, you mentioned something that we'll have the chance to go further after, which is the sense of entrepreneurship as a guild, which really differ with the kind of thing the way you handle a guild for a very traditional games. Jumping to you, Johnny, in Morpheus League, could you explain what's behind your DAO? When I say DAO, it's DAW. Why it's important to cover all aspects from coding to robot trading of educations?
Sure. Yes, it is DAW, not DAO, but it operates quite similarly, and I'll get into why we use that term. Maybe to start off, kind of just to understand what is a decentralized autonomous organization, or the traditional DAO, right? I mean, essentially, it's a community that's operating under a shared goal or a common goal. Each member, by holding tokens, have kind of an equal say in kind of the future or decisions of that organization, right? So, and it's the tokens that give them those that ability to vote on those decisions, and of course, depending on how much they own, it gives them a bigger say or lesser say. This includes things like managing the funds of the treasury, deciding on where the DAO is going to spend that money, how it's going to spend it, partnerships it's going to take on, and last but not least is how they actually are able to receive value, right, that accrues from the DAO and its investments or other revenue streams that it creates. So moving forward, Morpheus League, what we're trying to do is create a decentralized autonomous workforce. We don't use the word organizations because we think that the most value actually in our community is in the individuals, right? And together they can actually accomplish, almost anything they want, right? Because over time, this community will grow. We will educate them. They will become, better and more skilled at different, a variety of things that I'll talk about in a second, like coding, trading, analytics, and so on, right? And together they will actually be able to support not only the DAO itself and create revenue, but they'll actually be able to support other DAOs, other metaverse organizations, and other companies that are maybe trying to make that transition to Web3, right? So that's kind of the thinking behind this DAO. And to go back to your other question, essentially, why coding? Why having a variety of skill sets? I think is what you're aiming at. So maybe before I get there, I think the reason we went down this path, and I think maybe this would resonate with Sarutobi and Peter, is kind of an idea that was born because PDE is a very volatile industry, right? In the beginning, scholars can earn good income, but it tends to trend up and down, and it has a high dependence on the performance of the games in which the assets they're playing with, right? As well as, in those games then have dependence on other factors like market conditions, the number of users, etc. So when these games don't hit a certain inflection point, they haven't amassed enough users, or they don't have that, fun factor, then you essentially start to see a decline in that game's economy, right? So we needed to think of a way that we could allow scholars to kind of grow beyond this, right? So that there's continuously a way that they can actually earn, right, and create income for their livelihoods. So that's how this whole concept was kind of born. So yeah, P2E is like the carrot, right? It helps us attract those people, and then we're able to then using our training programs that we're building, upskill them, and then they're able to take on further opportunities. And kind of similar actually to a mentorship model, they can also then train, other members in the community. So in terms of the variety that we've chosen, right? The thinking behind that was actually because having gone through this GameFi wave, although it's been quite short, we believe that skills like coding, trading, analytics, social media will be the most valuable and in demand as Web3, as metaverses become almost the new normal. For example, coding, right? This is an essential skill that can actually be applied in a variety of ways in metaverse or Web3 type companies. For example, if you can code, you can adapt your knowledge to actually learn how to create smart contracts. You can do automation, which is super valuable skill in this industry, or even being able to build things in the metaverse, like constructs, things that people interact with, buildings, games, for example, even maps. So this is also not the tangent, but this is something that's coming up, and you're going to start to see a lot of games that do this, is UGC, right? The user-generated content. And I think Sandbox obviously has done a lot of that, and we're already seeing some games that haven't come out yet, but it's part of their model that they'll be doing. So yeah, that's kind of the thinking behind that variety.
Yeah, very clear, very clear. And actually, going back to you, Sarutobi, we know Yield Guild Games, as you mentioned, you are the first, one of the first, maybe the first, as you said, to very educate a large portion of people on play to earn in the Philippines and the other countries. But how to educate when you are aiming to talk to thousands of scholars all over the world? Is it a challenge to, I guess, yes, but how do you structure yourself in order to provide for so many people education?
Yeah, I mean, one of the kind of core strategies that YGG has employed has been starting up dedicated regional sub-DAOs. I don't know if you've seen about that, but we have like YGG Southeast Asia, which is focused on the whole Southeast Asia region, including Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and other countries in that region. We have Bays, who technically are a partner guild and who are focused on the Brazil market. And we also have IndieGG, which is focused on India. All of these are going to have their own localization specific to their geographical region. We also have Ola GG as well, who are focused on the Latin American region, which I'm quite passionate about as well. It's quite a big growth area for play to earn games. I think that's kind of less well championed than Asia, but I think could be just as meaningful in that area as well. We also have YGG Japan that started recently, which kind of has a slightly different focus in terms of like not necessarily targeting the kind of scholar player persona as much as maybe the kind of player investor persona, which again I think is going to be a large trend that we see across many guilds. This kind of, I think many guilds have kind of ended up focusing on the idea of just being a scholarship. And I mean, I think when we even use the term micro guild, I mean many of these micro guilds are, to all intents and purposes, maybe they're just specifically an Axie scholarship, or maybe they're just playing one or two games. And like, I mean, maybe I'm just kind of like being pedantic here about like the kind of use of words. I kind of see like true guilds being like kind of standards that many gamer types flock to, not just the scholar player persona type. And then so that kind of structuring YGG in such a way that we have like dedicated regional DAOs focused on those areas is I think going to be a way for us to kind of reach a far wider audience than we otherwise would have. And there's some really exciting plans in the works there for additional entities similarly, which will target all areas. And once we kind of have that, we have this whole ecosystem of interconnected guilds following a certain kind of best practice and so forth, which allows us to kind of easily communicate to a wide array of geographies in a very kind of localized fashion.
Yeah. And actually on that, Peter, I don't know what to think. I know that the guilds and all the operation are really focused on the Asian markets. It's where a lot of things happening there and happen there. But do you feel like there is? I know that in the BGA we having a lot of different guilds coming for the European markets. We targeting European player and American player as well. Do you feel like you're not gonna talk to guilds in Asia, in Europe, and in America with the same objective in terms of scholarship that you, depending on the region? Do you feel there will be differences in terms of needs for these guilds to operate?
Interesting question. So I guess, I mean, like what we've seen historically till now, right, is basically play to earn has been a narrative that's been adopted by kind of developing markets.
Yes.
Right. So we've seen basically the Philippines was basically, the I guess the birthplace, but also like one of the major drivers of like adoption through Axie first, right? But then of course there will be other games in the future. And but then we've also seen, adoption within like Venezuela, South America, right? We know that there are players playing in Africa. We know there are players playing in India, for instance, right? Indonesia as well. Now, I don't think it actually matters too much where the guild is based. I think definitely having access to local culture and market will give you an advantage. I mean, just understanding kind of like Filipinos onboarding Filipinos is much easier than a European guild onboarding Filipinos, because just from a cultural standpoint, I'm based in the Philippines. have been here for 10 years and I still don't 100% understand the culture through and through. You know, it's fairly complex, and there are lots of local nuances in terms of like just for onboarding purposes, you know, and educational purposes. Like, do you do things in English or do you do things in Tagalog, right? Or, you know, how should you communicate with people? Should it be through, you know, email, or should it be through social media, for instance? Like, and those are things like, you know, locals will understand best, right? So I think there is that advantage point if you know, the guilds are based kind of like in the markets where they're onboarding the players. I think you're going to see like they probably can scale faster, and that's where, you know, YGG's model of sub DAOs is absolutely awesome. I mean, it's, they understood that, you know, there's going to be local nuances in each of those different regions, and you need to have someone that understands like the nuances of onboarding, because that's ultimately what they're doing. Is, you know, you need to know how to actually, you know, you can't just throw things at people or be like, oh, you can earn money doing this. You know, you need to actually handhold them. Some people need education in a different kind of format. Some people are okay with YouTube videos, and then some people actually, they needed to like sit in the classroom type setup, right, and then need to kind of like be handheld through things, you know, and some are more tech savvy than others. A good one is also in Africa, where I am not sure if you guys are aware, is also that a lot of Africans don't have actually like IT equipment, so they don't have a laptop, and a lot of people don't have mobile phones, or at least smartphones, right? And then so if you're asking them to play to earn games, usually you actually have to provide the actual handset itself, right? And then take them into a kind of like a classroom setup to actually walk them through kind of like how to actually, you know, play these games. So I think that's, yeah, I think that's generally how I kind of see like the guild space kind of growing. I think those with kind of like more local market insights are going to have definitely that advantage in terms of like scaling and onboarding faster. I think the whole, but at saying this, you know, the whole thing is very borderless. You know, someone in South America could have Filipino scholars or players, right? I'm not always the biggest fan of the word scholar, because I don't think that that's I feel like the scholarship model, the loading model, is just one model that just exists right now. I don't know if that's going to be the most popular model in a year from now. I think we're going to have more different types of business models. I mean, I already know that, you know, you're going to have like landowners, you know, renting out basically their land to other people to play on. And in that case, I don't think they're going to be called scholars. I think you're just going to have participants, you know, just playing on other people's land, for instance. Right. So yeah, I think it's very it's a permissionless, borderless economy. But at the same time, I think the way that growth will happen will be very localized, which is yeah, I think YGG is kind of like pretty much got it when it comes to kind of like you know, localized growth.
Yeah, so interesting. So coming back to what you said, actually, Peter, and with my experience, I used to play a lot of video games, obviously, and belong to some of the guilds of these traditional games, and I know how they operate and they are operating, which is a lot of human resourcing, trying to manage the kind of player who will be able to be attending the next raid on that kind of thing. So it's really focusing on the human capabilities to join a specific events within the guild and in the game. But now I feel like the way of operating as a guild is more as an entrepreneur, as you said, Peter. And do you feel the same way, Johnny, based on the kind of skills you want everyone and your scholars, sorry to use that terms, Peter, to be educating on? Do you feel that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to an extent, I think that's part of it. I think it obviously, I think going back to what you were saying, the countries is obviously a big factor in terms of how they actually view, you know, the position that they're gaining, either whether it's NFTs being lent to them or whether it's education being taught to them and how they're going to apply that. It depends on the country, the background, what stage of life they're at, their motivation. So there's a variety of things. So I can't give a blanket answer, but I would say yes for some, definitely, because I do see a big percentage of the people in our community are actually young, either haven't gone to school, haven't gone to university yet, or just about to, or are just starting. So yeah, in that sense, you know, being able to work borderlessly at home at your own convenience, it does kind of give you that personal sense of, you know, entrepreneurship. You went out on your own, and it all happened from, you know, your seat of your chair, right? And then once you start to learn more, right, you can actually, in a way, you're essentially become a I can't remember the legal word for this, but it's like you're the sole proprietor, right? You're your own company, right? And then you'll have maybe you have an NFT that's being lent to you. You're using that to generate income. Maybe you learn coding. You start offering coding services to other DAOs or to other Web3 companies that are trying to, you know, make the transition, or maybe they're just lacking people or manpower, right? So, yeah, that's kind of how I would put it.
Yeah, true. Leading to a very other subjects, and I would like to have your opinion on that, which is esports and what's happening in esports today. Do you feel, Sarutobi, that your activity and the activities with Yield Guild Games and the Scholars, and these two roles of guilds and esports will be combined together, will operate together, or it's going to be two different things?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are kind of like two different things, but they can exist side by side, and one can lead to another. You know, someone can be a scholar, and then maybe they, you know, their level of play gets to a point where they can participate in esports. You know, maybe they still continue to be a scholar. Maybe they buy their own assets, which is obviously a positive, but then they still identify as being part of a guild. Again, this is something the kind of play, you know, goes back to what I was saying before about participants not necessarily only being scholars when they're involved with guilds. And I think that the kind of esports component to that is going to be something that really helps foster the retention of like skilled players on a long-term basis. And it's going to be a challenge, but like I think it's you know, that's definitely a really good mechanism to like incentivize people to stay connected to guilds. But yeah, I mean, again, one could imagine that like in some games, you know, a player may be a player investor, but depending on the nature of the game in question, you know, there may be in the future games where assets might have attained like extremely high value, and then the guild in question might own these extremely high value assets, and then someone might themselves be a player investor, maybe with even quite a high net worth, but then they still might not necessarily be able to buy themselves $1 million spaceship or whatever, and maybe that's where kind of is that player a scholar just because they're borrowing an asset? I mean, in some senses maybe they are, but I think maybe they're just more of a pilot. But then I mean, it's just semantics at the end of the day, like calling them a scholar, calling them whatever you want to call them, the renter of an asset. At the end of the day, it kind of equates to the same thing. But yeah, I definitely see like esports as being like probably one of the kind of primary drivers of this kind of retention of like the most skilled players within guilds. And I think it's something which, you know, many guilds and the blockchain games that are being developed need to work on. And I mean, an additional layer to that, and something which I'd be extremely excited to see happen, is actually guilds actually, you know, play to earn guilds, blockchain gaming guilds start to try and have some kind of presence in traditional gaming. Now, obviously, that's, you know, I don't think it's really a thing right now, and it's a very challenging space to go into, but it is something that I'd love to kind of start seeing eventually happen.
Yeah,
I'd love to jump on this as well. Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead, Peter, please.
Yeah, so just kind of like my speculative thoughts on this, just because okay, like taking a lot of pieces from what everyone has said, right? We're creating this workforce, and this workforce is basically playing computer games day in, day out, most of them for a living, right? You know, it becomes very repetitive, basically, to play the game all day long. Like a lot of people don't realize, like, you know, even though it's a computer game, you know, if you do a lot of automated tasks, or like, you know, the same tasks over and over again, I think you know, the game itself becomes less fun, right? And I think that the fun factor it will be brought back in through kind of like the competitive side, right? So I think so I've seen a couple of startups like come into like the automated tournament space. You know, I think for guilds that's probably going to be a really, really big thing in order to you know, basically create community engagement, right? So you want to keep your community engaged, you want to keep them happy, you want to show them, like, you know, yeah, we know that you're grinding like 2 to 4 hours a day. We know that it's, you know, the game is not as fun as it was like when you were just playing like, you know, an hour here and there, right? But if you bring in the tournament side, I think that's going to be a critical part of basically, I guess, the community engagement piece, right? Because ultimately, yeah, people are playing computer games, so they should be fun, and like, and it should be competitive. Like a lot of it is like, you know, either like if you're playing in a PvP, like, you know, the goal is to win, right? So I feel like that you might see this new class and like of because I feel like, you know, PTE like and blockchain gaming or NFT gaming in general like brings out these new models, right? So I feel like that we might see this new emergence of what esport, like a subclass of esports, which is basically tailored towards like this the communities of the guilds, right? So you know, we've got really big communities. There are like millions and millions of people within these communities, right? And you know, even though they might not want to compete on a high level, like on the traditional esports level, where you're, you know, you know, competing for very, very large prize pools. I think you're going to have like smaller prize pools, you know, intra guild, and we're already seeing that guild versus guild kind of esports, right? And that's it's kind of very grassroots right now, but I feel like that part's actually going to grow like as the space grows, because I feel like the, you know, as long as the guilds are still there, you know, there's still going to be that interest to have kind of like inter guild kind of like tournaments, right? So I think you might have this like subclass of like what esports looks like for the guild space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Jenny, I know that you want to go on with that, please.
Absolutely. Itching. So no, I definitely agree, and I think that there's definitely a pattern that we're starting to see in terms of the blockchain games. It tends to start out on the easier side, and then it starts to become very skill based, right? So unless you're able to adapt or you're already a skilled player, it's hard to actually survive and you know, maintain your income at the previous levels that it was at. So not only that, but I think that more games might even just decide to target, you know, the more skilled players and kind of forget, you know, the ones that are just in it more for the money, right? And not so much, you know, the skill of the game. So ourselves, we're actually already in talks with a high level esports tournament host that we're trying to partner with. So I think, yes, firstly, it will achieve that engagement because, you know, people can watch it, they can participate, and they can also kind of interact with, you know, some of the best gaming talent, right? And having these tournaments and organizing, you know, the sponsors, the prize pools, that actually helps you as a organization to attract, you know, the best gaming talent. And I think for us, we hope that the skills of our scholars will be able to improve through such tournaments, right? And through the frequent competition, right? So by participating, playing better players, they learn more and get better, right? And they get on the leaderboards, and also then they're able to add an additional income stream, you know, to their traditional scholarship, as we've been calling it. And also it helps us to attract, more, I would say, top level scholars who are actually more interested in the esports side of things and maybe not so much, just the plain normal scholarship.
Yeah.
Also, maybe just to add another thing is that, there's the types of sponsors that are now sponsoring these esports tournaments between guilds. They're different to your traditional esports sponsors, but they have a very specific objective, right? Which is like, for instance, like you've seen like MakerDAO want to incentivize the usage of DAI, right? Or within like all these different guild communities, and so they basically sponsor prize pools and DAI, and make sure that all the participants plus any people that are watching basically get these drops in DAI to kind of incentivize usage of tokens, right? And you can see that for other protocols, and like given how many tokens there are just in the whole cryptocurrency space right now, you can imagine there's going to be a lot of interest to want to tap this Web3 native community, like bunch of communities, to kind of incentivize them to use your different types of tokens, right? So yeah, I think you're going to see like these different sponsors that I think they just don't even know that this whole like guild to guild tournament stuff is happening, and that the guilds are basically onboarding all these people into crypto, right? Because all these people are now familiar with like how to use wallets, how to make transactions, how to use an exchange, how to get into DeFi, and basically the guilds are kind of like providing that educational platform for these communities, right? And so it makes a lot of sense that you have sponsors that want to be able to tap these kind of communities, and they will do so through kind of like esports sponsorships, or they're basically sponsoring basically these communities.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, in the Blockchain Game Alliance, obviously the purpose of what we do is to promote blockchain within the gaming industry and to attract some blockchain gaming projects to grow and to develop their games based on blockchain technologies. And going back to that matter, Sarutobi, you have I guess a different way to accept some of the games you will be able to educate for your scholars. So how do you choose the best games to be able to be integrating in your program? What will be the parameters to be able to be chosen for any games who are in the Blockchain Game Alliance?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, there's quite a number of different criteria that we look for. Solid, economics within a game is obviously a really important one. The game needs to, appear like it's going to be sustainable to some degree. I mean, that's an extremely challenging nut to crack. But obviously, I think we can see a lot of development in that area there. In addition to that, there's some more kind of specific stuff to guilds and YGG in particular, and that's things like there being some ability to own assets, but delegate the use of those assets in a safe way that then allows for the sharing of revenue generated by that asset, and doing that in a kind of efficient and equitable way. To kind of give the example of, say, Axie, the lending of assets within Axie was never like a kind of baked in feature. It was something that was kind of seemed to be more of a kind of loophole rather than actually being like a designed feature. So in Axie, the owner of the guild creates large numbers of accounts. These accounts are accessed via a username and password that doesn't give access to the underlying assets, and this allows for the revenue to be shared. The downside of this is it gives too much power to the guild in this scenario, or the lender of assets. Now, obviously, many guilds are quite ethical entities that do share funds, but obviously, as Peter can definitely tell you as well from experience, not every actor in the space is always going to play fair here and pay their scholars. So what's great to see in some new games that are kind of kind of trying to build on what Axie has started, we can see things like smart contracts that allow for predefined revenue shares of assets. They lock an asset in place for a specific amount of time. Some games that we see this happening in are like Cyball, for example. I believe Genopets is going to have a similar kind of function. Some other games are designed so differently as well that like it's very easy for things like this to work as well. Some examples might be things like Guild of Guardians, for example, where there's a guild NFT which the guild can own, and then players, it's actually a free-to-play game, and then obviously based on the performance of specific members of the guild, we can identify who the top players are, maybe position them inside the NFT guild, and then a percentage of the the crafted items sales will automatically be redirected back to the guild NFT holder. So there's lots of different mechanics like that. There are, if you pardon the phrase, there's plenty of ways to skin a cat, but definitely you want some kind of mechanism by which a guild can own assets, but then have the community leverage those assets in a way where the yield can be shared fairly between the player and the guild. And obviously having that done in a permissionless manner is obviously arguably the most ideal way of it being done. So some get, as we see the influx of Web 2 developers into the space, I have seen some developers are actually doing this on the kind of the server side, which obviously is anathema to some smart contract guys out there. But at the same time, if it does the job, it does the job. And sometimes blockchains are still kind of not always the most reliable either. So obviously it's great to see it being done on blockchains where possible, but obviously like I said, there's many different ways for that to be done. So yeah, definitely like the ability for and obviously for game developers and for games who are part of the Blockchain Game Alliance who want to don't think this is just something that guilds themselves want to see. Again, like we have micro guilds who could be extremely small, or even just like the player investor type persona. If I'm a player investor, if I know that I can buy X number of assets within a game, and then I can very permissionlessly lend them safely to, maybe the player investor ends up having a child or gets sick for a period of time or whatever. For whatever reason, they're not able to use their assets. Maybe they were super passionate about the game and they bought a surplus of assets to what they can physically use themselves. Having some kind of mechanism there for any kind of level of investor to delegate those assets to a third party allows for like a more capital efficiency in the game economy, and also things like multi-beneficiary payment distribution mechanics, if that makes sense. So like as in like I'm the owner of the asset, maybe there's an external investor, maybe then there's also the guild themselves, maybe some sort of mentor. Like we said, some games require like high levels of mentorship or actual the equivalent of like real administration. So that's something that we've seen with many Axie guilds. There might sometimes be like multiple beneficiaries. There might be an external investor, the guild themselves, a manager, and a player. So that could be 4 different parties that all need to receive some kind of payment. So from a game design point of view, like having the ability to like share revenues from assets, those are some sort of core concepts. I'm sure Johnny would have some points to maybe add there for things that it's good to see games have.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think quite similar to an extent. And it's actually something I thought about a lot as well, is if someone could create almost like a plug and play to any game, and then immediately you can do your asset renting without an intermediary, right? So it's fully automated and permissionless. So that would be interesting to see. Especially for games that don't have the time and they're just trying to rush to get the game live. So who knows, maybe we'll see that soon. But yeah, I mean, I think we look at, similar things, but I think maybe to add some things different. We obviously look at the people behind the game, including, the investors. So when we're making those decisions, it's important that I have people. Generally, we try to look at companies that we've heard of, right? Or at least we could find if we were to search and be able to look at maybe past investments they've done, what's in their portfolio, what's their track record, and then also looking at the team themselves behind the game, right? Just seeing if they have experience, maybe traditional gaming, big game studios, Activision, Ubisoft, etc., or maybe have worked on, games that were, popular in the traditional gaming, or maybe online gaming, like, Call of Duty, for example, or Fortnite. These are some of the things that we look at. We also look at the playability, right? How easy is it for someone to play, or is it a more skilled game? As we talked about earlier, there can be a different range of, people that the game suited for, right? So yeah, I think that's kind of some of the things different, I guess, that weren't mentioned already. And definitely the roadmap, right? I think that's really important. I know that their games struggle to commit, obviously, to the roadmaps, because this is a new industry. It's a new frontier. Everyone's learning, everyone's going through trial and error constantly. But we generally try to not go too far out. I don't want to put a number out there, but I think I think under 2 years is probably our limit. And of course, we want to see a guild model in that roadmap, right? And I think that's what Sarutobi was saying as well, because it's important to have the ability to lend out your assets from your treasury, right? And if there's not, is there a way to bootstrap it, right? Like as everyone did in Axie Infinity.
Yeah. I guess thank you guys for all of that insight you provided based on the educations and what you do with your activities for YGG blockchain space and Morpheus League. It was a real pleasure to have you on the panel. And yes, I saw the comments where you should have had for the demo day we previously had, you should have won something. So I'm gonna talk to the team to be able to bring that to you. So again, guys, thank you very much for participating to that panel, and I see you very soon. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
so much.